The great power of photography is to evoke and validate memory. It still holds on that long after you've forgotten the color of her hair or the sound of his voice, you still have that little piece of film. You have to provoke people you have to demand that they get deeper and deeper.
Hello there. Duane Michals died earlier this month at the age of 94. Some people have referred to him as a conceptual artist, but he was poles apart from earnest students trying to demonstrate their intelligence and rebellion. Actually, he was a restless storyteller who was constantly curious and inventive. He considered himself to be a short story writer. I become instantly suspicious when I see the words conceptual and art in close proximity to each other in a sentence. But as I read about Michals and listened to him speaking about his practice, I became drawn to him as a person and appreciated his contribution to photography. The medium for him was a vehicle of expression, and the conceptual elements in his work are less about intellectual puzzles and more about devices that allow him to tell stories about the invisible aspects of the human experience.
And the questions are very easy. What is life? What is death? What is God? What is humor? The fundamental things that we take for granted, and I had to figure out the answer.
He believed that art should be created through passion, but he was disenchanted with the postmodern art of today. He described the state of the present art world as fascistic and tacky. Michals began disobeying the rules of photography in the 1960s. It was a period in which straight photography was the only photographic language in town. He started producing sequences of images that explored themes of death, sexual identity, and loneliness.
The photographs are in the service of stories. Essentially, it's the story, and our lives are stories, You could do a drama of two men passing each other going down the street that could be fraught with emotion, suggestion, terror. You don't need to do these huge things. The slightest thing, poetry is in the slightest gesture. It's not about production qualities. Sequences gave me a vehicle to subvert reality, to question reality.
He was frustrated by what he saw as the limitations of the single image and began telling layered narratives through his series. He explained that a photograph could describe appearances, but only stories could approach the complexity of lived experience.
I like challenge. I like having to make something from nothing. And isn't that art, making something from nothing? I'm fascinated by the nature of thinking. I've always been very curious about everything, and that goes with the territory. The curiosity leads you to asking questions. I've always said that my basic feeling is not what does something look like, but what does it feel like? So that demands a whole other part of your brain to solve that problem.
When this work was exhibited at the Underground Gallery in New York, Gary Winogrand came up to him and said, "What is this? This isn't photography." Although this was meant as a criticism, the remark was a backhanded compliment. Michals was proposing an extended vision of what photography could be. In the 1970s, he began scribbling text directly onto the print. This work includes an image of a bar and is titled, "There Are Things Here Not Seen in This Photograph." The text reads, "My shirt is wet with perspiration. The beer tastes good, but I was still thirsty. Some drunk was talking to another drunk about Nixon. I watched a roach walk slowly along the edge of a bar stool. On the jukebox, Glenn Campbell began singing about southern nights. I had to go to the men's room. A derelict was walking towards me to ask for money. It was time to leave. His inscription completely changes our experience. It becomes part photography, part literature, and part imaginary movie. He wasn't writing captions that explained what was in the picture. He was pointing at things that can't be seen. In a 1975 group portrait of his family titled "A Letter from My Father," he was exploring the lack of connection that he had with his father.
Like when I took the picture of my mother, father, and my brother, and I wrote underneath it, one day he said he was going to write me a letter, true story, but he never wrote the letter. And I used to wonder what was going to be in the letter. And then I thought, well, maybe some family mystery. Maybe we're going to share finally, but the letter never did arrive, and I never found that place where he hid his love.
Unlike many conceptual artists, Michals rarely begins with an abstract proposition or a critique of the medium itself. Instead, he begins with a human situation.
So this is one of the first pictures I wrote on. When the picture comes down, I'm not there. Oh, you're supposed to, never mind. Okay.
He believed that his role was to redefine the medium rather than remain defined by it. Because he only began taking pictures at the age of 28 and never studied photography, he didn't carry the baggage of the medium's history.
My sources have always been my fears and my anger. I've always maintained that everything is subject for photography, but I'm very introspective and liking language. It all came together. And also, I didn't go to photography school, which was my great savings, because they have to teach you something in photography schools. And they usually teach you rules, their rules. And so then you have to unlearn all of that before you can free yourself from your expensive education. Contradicting reality is a great gift or weapon that photographers have with people's perception, but photographers already tell me what I already know. I don't want to know what I know. My gift to you is not to tell you what you know, is to surprise you.
Michals was born in an industrial town in Pennsylvania, where his father was a steel worker and his mother worked as a maid. His complicated relationship with his father was one of his enduring themes over the years. He treated it almost as an unresolved emotional puzzle. Michals' personal life and his art constantly overlap. His long relationship with his partner, his Catholic upbringing, his experience as a gay man, and his fascination with literature and mortality all became raw material for his photography. During his early teenage years, he began breaking away from Catholicism. He described himself as a lapsed Catholic, but spirituality and metaphysics remained a major thread within his work. He was fascinated by heaven, the soul, life after death, angels, and the possibility of transcendence. But he approached religion poetically. In works like The Spirit Leaves the Body, he's exploring what might lie beyond ordinary perception, rather than proclaiming a particular belief. Even though within his work he was dealing with complex ideas of being human, he avoided presenting his explorations in a pretentious or over-intellectualized way. He also never drew rigid boundaries between high art and paid work. Some photographers insist on a strict separation between personal practice and commercial work. They often view paid work as an act of selling out. Michals said that he wasn't a photo snob and dismissed ideas of artistic purity. He approached his own projects, editorial assignments, and commercial work with the same degree of curiosity and with an anticipation of possibility. Throughout his career, he took hundreds of portraits, many for publications like Esquire and New York Times Magazine. He was less focused on how the people look and more interested in what they were thinking or dreaming. So many of his portraits blur the line between portraiture and visual storytelling. One of his first breaks came when he was commissioned by Esquire to photograph the surrealist painter René Magritte. He spent a week with him at his Belgian home and produced a series of playful and inventive portraits that correlate with Magritte's own work.
When you do a portrait, you have to bring insight into the picture, or else it's just description. People assume they're portraits. When I worked with Magritte, I worked in the manner of Magritte. I don't do two portraits the same. Most portraitists have a style. I think you have to take a portrait in the manner of the subject. I believe in a prose portrait is a portrait that tells a story about the person. So all the Magritte portraits with him at the easel, where he looks like one of his own paintings, that's very much in the manner of Magritte. So that brings a little more insight into somebody.
He said that every day they would sit and have lunch together while watching the television saga Bonanza, which had been dubbed into French. Afterwards, Magritte would take a nap while still dressed in his suit, and Michals photographed him asleep on the sofa. Both these artists shared a fascination with the sleep state and the influence that it has on our lives and creativity.
Dreams, we dream all the time. I photographed Magritte asleep. Well, that's what Magritte looks like I like to know what kind of dreams did Magritte have. Can you imagine? Most people's dreams are more interesting in their lives. So that whole part of your life, what you can see, I'm interested in what something feels like more than what it looks like.
In this 1969 portrait of Johnny Cash for Mademoiselle magazine, rather than placing Cash directly before the camera in the conventional manner, Michals photographed him through a window, allowing his reflection to become a major element in the image. At that time, this was a very unorthodox approach to portraiture. The result reveals a psychological encounter in which Cash isn't portrayed as the larger-than-life man in black star. He seems more contemplative and isolated because of his public profile. Commissioning editors and commercial art directors were drawn to him because they never really knew what he was going to come up with. One of the people that he collaborated with described working with him as a creative treasure hunt. He was very unpretentious, and even during the time when he was receiving a lot of commercial work, he never owned his own studio. Some people, though, didn't quite understand where he was at.
I remember once I went to photograph the president of IBM, and I just had like a little bag, and I had my photo, where I bought my film bag. And the art director of a big agency wrote about whatever. And he said how when we went to visit, and there I was like with a plastic bag and my little bag, and he was embarrassed that I looked like I was an amateur. Boy, did I fool him.
Through the 1960s and 70s, there was a lot of resistance to his ideas from the artistic community. But by the 80s, Michals had largely moved from being an innovative outsider to an established figure of significance. Museums increasingly acquired his work, and surveys of contemporary photography began including him alongside figures like Diane Arbus and Lee Freelander. A 1984 retrospective at the International Center of Photography cemented his status. A later show at the Carnegie Museum of Art included work that he had produced over 6 decades and was simply called Storyteller. I hope you enjoyed that work, and I'll see you next time.
But if you become famous for one thing, it's too easy to get trapped into that if the thing has no latitude. True style is inherent. You don't go looking for it, you discover it.